Every man lives with a shadow. It is not a creature of myth or fiction, but a part of his very self, one that lurks in the recesses of the mind, cloaked in silence. This shadow is formed not by accident but by design, as a man learns to deny the truths that are inconvenient to his identity, his pride, and his place in the world. It is built from suppressed desires, hidden rage, concealed envy, and the countless truths he chose not to face for the sake of acceptance, praise, or survival. But that which is buried is never dead. It waits, it watches, and it acts through weakness, hesitation, and shame. The man who believes he is only made of light is the most vulnerable of all, for he refuses to look into the mirror that shows him as he is, not as he pretends to be. To deny the shadow is to live in delusion, and delusion, no matter how noble it may feel, is a weakness the world punishes harshly. The shadow grows stronger the longer it is ignored. It appears in moments of panic, in bursts of anger, in the cowardice of silence when speech is needed. It is what causes a man to sabotage his own success, to flee from love, to betray himself in subtle but consistent ways. The shadow whispers doubts into the heart of a man who cannot recognize it. He believes these doubts are truth, but they are simply the voice of the self he refuses to face. The danger is not in the existence of darkness within. It is in pretending it does not exist at all. The man who never confronts this part of himself becomes a puppet to it. He blames others for his misfortune, avoids accountability, and repeats the same mistakes under the illusion that he is a victim of fate. But in reality, he is a victim of his own blindness. His shadow manipulates him because he has not claimed ownership of it. His energy is divided, his actions scattered, and his confidence brittle. He is easily broken by criticism, easily led by louder voices, and easily consumed by inner conflict. The shadow, left unattended, becomes the master. It does not need to roar to destroy. It only needs to remain unseen. True strength begins when a man decides to look inward without flinching, to examine the parts of himself that hunger for power, that crave revenge, that desire domination, that fear failure, that envy the powerful. These are not things to be denied or destroyed. They are to be understood, confronted, and forged into tools. The shadow contains not just weakness, but potential for clarity, for willpower, for mastery over chaos. It is only through this confrontation that a man begins to unify the war within himself. Only then does he stop projecting monsters onto the world around him. He realizes the battlefield is inside, and he is both the soldier and the general. Denying the shadow is not virtue. It is fear in disguise, and fear is a leash that others will happily use to control you. Power belongs to the man who knows himself completely, not just the side of himself that earns praise, but the side that dwells in silence, in calculation, in ambition. Many are taught to chase only what is good, what is kind, what is pleasing to others. They mold themselves into figures of virtue, believing that by denying their darker instincts they rise above the common man. But in truth, they weaken themselves. They cut away the very parts of their nature that would have made them formidable. They confuse acceptance with strength and approval with authority. The man who strives only to be gentle and noble becomes dependent on the mercy of others, unable to enforce his will, unprepared for betrayal, incapable of commanding respect. To wield power is not to amputate your nature, but to sharpen it. Wholeness does not mean being flawless. It means being capable of both mercy and ferocity, of softness and steel. The man who integrates all his qualities, both those admired and those feared, becomes unpredictable, dangerous, respected. His kindness is not weakness, but a conscious decision made from strength. His silence is not passivity, but a tactic. His ruthlessness is not cruelty, but clarity. There are moments in life when power is preserved not by being just, but by being unyielding. When mercy becomes a threat to your own survival, to offer it is not virtue, it is sabotage. The world does not honor those who refuse to defend themselves. It steps over them, it takes from them, and worse, it forgets them. The man who wishes to be only loved must beg for that love. The man who is both loved and feared never has to beg for anything. He commands loyalty not through charm, but through the certainty that he will not hesitate to act. He understands that those who follow him do so not just because of his light, but because of the shadow he carries and controls. This shadow gives him gravity. It makes his presence known before he even speaks. It ensures that he is not mistaken for the weak. Virtue without strength is ornamental. It decorates a man's character but offers no protection. In the harsh affairs of life, where betrayal is common and ambition is a currency, such virtue is the first thing to be exploited. Those who refuse to understand this live in illusion, and illusions are fatal. The man who wishes to lead must be whole. He must be capable of kindness, yes, but also of decisive cruelty when it is necessary. He must speak with warmth, but also be able to command silence with a glance. He must listen, but not tolerate disrespect. These contradictions are not flaws, they are the architecture of true power. To master oneself, one must be willing to look inward without sentimentality. The light and the dark are not enemies. They are allies in the pursuit of sovereignty. Only when a man unites them does he become indomitable. It is not virtue alone that forges kings. It is wholeness sharpened by experience and sealed with the will to never bow again. Your enemies already know more about you than you realize. Not because you've told them, but because your behavior betrays you. The shadow you refuse to face is not as hidden as you believe. It leaks out through your voice, your body, your hesitation. They see your envy when you speak of others' success with a forced smile. They hear your insecurity when you over-explain yourself, when you justify your worth instead of embodying it. They sense your fear when you avoid confrontation, when you reach for approval instead of asserting your will. And in that recognition, they gain power over you. What you conceal from yourself, others exploit. You are not safe behind silence. You are exposed by it. This world is not blind. It watches, it studies. The moment you reveal an unclaimed part of yourself, someone will seize it and turn it into a lever. The rival does not strike where you are strong. He strikes where you are uncertain. Your shadow, unacknowledged and unclaimed, becomes a weapon against you. It is the crack in your armor that no one else needs to create. You built it yourself through denial. A man who walks through life pretending to be only light is easy to manipulate. His desire to be seen as righteous makes him predictable. His fear of appearing ruthless makes him weak. He fights with half his strength tied behind his back and wonders why he keeps losing ground. To face the shadow is to remove the mask. It is to say, yes, I have ambition. Yes, I have anger. Yes, I have hunger for greatness, for vengeance, for dominance. These truths do not make a man evil. They make him honest. And honesty with the self is the first act of real power. When you confront the parts of yourself that others use against you, they lose their grip. You become untouchable, not because you have no darkness, but because you own it fully. You are no longer ashamed. You no longer hide. And because of that, your enemies can no longer predict you. A man who knows his shadow can walk into any room without fear of being exposed. He has already exposed himself to himself. The shame has burned away. The guilt has been turned into wisdom. His presence is heavy, not because he is loud, but because there is no fracture between what he is and what he shows. He does not seek to please. He does not need to defend. He simply is. And in that stillness, others become uneasy. They sense they cannot manipulate what they cannot decode. He becomes an enigma not because he hides, but because he is whole. Mastery over one's darkness is the path to dominance, not over others, but over circumstance, over fear, over the chaos that rules lesser men. When you claim the parts of yourself that were once liabilities, they become tools. Your anger becomes fuel. Your ambition becomes direction. Your hunger becomes strategy. And your past, no matter how twisted, becomes armor no man can pierce. The man who suppresses his darkness becomes a servant to fear. He builds his life upon avoidance, avoiding confrontation, avoiding rejection, avoiding failure, avoiding truth. He convinces himself that this path is noble, that silence is strength, that compliance is virtue. But beneath this illusion, he is ruled by terror. Every decision he makes is filtered through the question, what will they think of me? He wears masks not out of strategy, but out of desperation. He moves carefully, not because he is calculated, but because he is scared of what happens when he is truly seen. In doing so, he does not protect himself. He weakens himself. Fear is no longer a signal. It becomes the master of his will. The man who buries his darker nature loses access to the most essential forces of self-preservation. His instincts dull. His fire fades. He forgets how to defend his name, how to raise his voice, how to say no without apology. He trades strength for safety, but safety is a lie in a world that does not hesitate to devour the passive. He cannot say what he thinks because he is afraid of the consequences. He cannot act with authority because he has denied the very parts of himself that produce it. His kindness becomes cowardice. His humility becomes invisibility. His desire to be liked strips him of the power to be respected. A man like this is not harmless. He is dangerous to himself. He sabotages opportunity. He refuses to take risks that would elevate him. He becomes a spectator in his own life, watching others take what he wants because he cannot summon the courage to claim it. Deep down, he knows he is capable of more. But the voice that once drove him has gone quiet. He buried it, called it arrogance, pride, aggression. In doing so, he silenced the only part of himself that could have led him forward when the world turned hostile. He allowed fear to take the throne and called it peace. What he does not understand is that the darkness he fled from was never there to destroy him. It was there to protect him, to challenge him, to give him the edge. Rage can be refined into resolve. Pride can be sharpened into dignity. Hunger can become ambition, but only if they are owned, studied, and wielded like blades forged in fire. The refusal to acknowledge these forces does not erase them. It only ensures they will act without your permission. They will surface in your weakest moments, sabotage your decisions, damage your relationships, and leave you wondering why everything you touch slips away. To deny darkness is to fracture the soul. The man who cannot face his anger becomes explosive. The man who cannot face his envy becomes bitter. The man who cannot face his ambition becomes jealous of those who achieve. This fracture divides him, weakens him, and ensures he remains beneath his potential. Power begins where pretense ends. To face the shadow is not to become cruel. It is to become complete. When a man avoids his shadow, he forfeits command over his own destiny. He becomes a creature shaped by the expectations of others, molded by culture, family, friends, and strangers whose opinions he fears more than failure itself. In this state, his choices are not truly his. They are borrowed, inherited, conditioned. He speaks with the voice of those who taught him to be good rather than strong, polite rather than honest, soft rather than sovereign. He smiles when he wants to scream, agrees when he should resist, follows when he was born to lead. The tragedy is not that he is misunderstood, but that he has misunderstood himself. He thinks he is virtuous, when in truth he is obedient, and obedience without judgment is the death of individuality. The man who does not confront his shadow cannot trust himself. He fears his impulses, second, guesses his instincts, and hesitates in moments that require immediacy. He does not know what he believes. He only knows what he's supposed to say. He walks through life trying to do the right thing, without ever defining what right even means to him. His internal compass is not broken. It was never allowed to develop. It was silenced before it could speak, censored by guilt, shame, and the need to be accepted by everyone but himself. Such a man may appear gentle, even noble, but when the pressure rises, when life demands resolve, he collapses. Not because he is weak by nature, but because he abandoned the very roots of his strength. The path to reclaiming this power is brutal. It requires standing alone in silence and calling forward the voice that has been buried for years. It means confronting the resentment, the rage, the jealousy, the lust, the hunger for dominance. All the things he was told to hide, suppress, destroy. Not to indulge them, but to understand them. Because only through understanding does mastery begin. The beast within is not the enemy, it is the energy source. It is raw, wild, unshaped, but it is yours. And once you claim it, once you channel it through discipline and intention, it becomes unstoppable. Every man who has changed the course of history, every man who has built an empire, every man who commands reverence, they all knew their darkness. Not because they were wicked, but because they were real. They accepted themselves as complete. They did not apologize for wanting more, for speaking with force, for carving space in a world that takes from the quiet. They knew that to influence the world, they first had to dominate their own internal chaos. This dominance is not about control, it's about harmony. It's about recognizing that every piece of you has value, even the parts that scare you, especially those. The man who has integrated his shadow cannot be intimidated. He does not fear rejection because he has accepted himself fully. He does not fear loss because he knows he can rebuild. He does not need validation because he validates his own existence through action, through presence, through unflinching self-awareness. Power begins not in perfection, but in self-possession. The man who faces his shadow, the envy, the rage, the lust, the fear, the unspoken hunger, becomes untouchable, not because he is immune to pain, but because he understands it. He bends his darkness into discipline, his chaos into command. He does not shrink to fit the world's comfort. He expands unapologetically, shaping the world instead. Where others wear masks, he wears truth. Where others beg for approval, he walks with authority. And while many chase the illusion of virtue, he becomes whole, light and dark, fire and form, feared and respected. In that wholeness, he does not merely survive, he conquers.